June 4th, 1942. 10:52 a.m. Japanese carrier Hiryū, 150 miles northwest of Midway. Lieutenant Mio Kobayashi's hand shook as he traced positions on his chart, the pencil hovering over coordinates that made no sense. Through the ready room porthole, he watched Admiral Taman Yamaguchi bent over recon photos, his face showing not anger or confusion, but the slow recognition that something basic had gone terribly wrong. Impossible. We confirmed her loss in the Coral Sea. I saw her burning, listing, deserted. Yet the photograph showed an American carrier launching planes, its island silhouette unmistakable even through the grain. 3 carriers. The Americans had 3 carriers at Midway, not 2. The neat math of victory, 4 Japanese carriers against 2 American, had just collapsed. 27 days earlier in the Coral Sea, Japanese air crews had left this same ship mortally hurt, oil streaming, dead in the water. Admiral Takeo Takagi reported to Tokyo, Yorktown-class carrier eliminated. The Naval General Staff struck her from their estimates. And still, there she was, USS Yorktown, very much alive, her aircraft already diving on the fleet. Over the intercom, Kobayashi could hear confusion racing through Hiryū. 3 carriers meant roughly 230 American aircraft, not 150. 3 carriers meant the trap had flipped. 3 carriers meant everything. Imperial Navy intelligence about American repair speed was disastrously wrong. Was the impossible sight of Yorktown at Midway shattered the core Japanese assumption about industrial reality. In Imperial Navy calculations, repairing battle damage properly took meticulous work, months of careful craft and honor-bound standards. A carrier with a 551-pound bomb hole punched through 5 decks, ruptured tanks, and shredded compartments needed a minimum of 90 days in the best yard. The math seemed irrefutable. Enterprise and Hornet were the only American carriers left in the Pacific. Lexington lay on the bottom of the Coral Sea. Saratoga was still in the yard after a torpedo hit. The new Essex-class ships would not arrive until 1943. Intelligence repeated this again and again, but numbers meant nothing to the SBD Dauntlesses now dropping toward Japanese decks. As Admiral Nagumo's staff recalculated in a frenzy, one fact became clear. Operation MI rested completely on the idea that Americans could not do what they clearly had done. Before the Coral Sea deception, May 8, 1942. Coral Sea, 500 miles northeast of Australia. The strike had been textbook. 18 Type 99 dive bombers from Shokaku and Zuikaku found Yorktown emerging from a rain squall. Lieutenant Commander Kakuichi Takahashi led the attack and watched a direct hit land near the island. The 250-kilogram bomb punched through the flight deck and exploded 5 levels down, the blast visible from 10,000 feet. Yorktown staggered out trailing a 10-meter oil wake. Down at the bow, fires visible through side holes. Speed looked to be about 6 knots to Japanese observers. Pilots returning to their carriers called her finished, listing so far they believed she couldn't recover aircraft. Photos showed destroyers closing for rescue. Admiral Takagi radioed Combined Fleet Headquarters. 2 American carriers confirmed destroyed, Yorktown and Lexington. The Emperor was notified. Planners at Kura removed Yorktown from the order of battle. In their Midway math, she no longer existed. Captain Elliot Buckmaster, Yorktown's skipper, had other plans. As his ship limped away at closer to 20 knots, far faster than the 6 knots the Japanese estimated, his damage control teams worked their first miracle. The bomb had killed 66 men on the spot, wrecked 6 compartments, smashed elevator machinery, and ruptured tanks along 30 frames. By standard naval engineering, Yorktown needed months in dry dock. The voyage home, May 8 to 27, 1942, Coral Sea to Pearl Harbor, showed the first glimpse of American industrial thinking. The damage was severe, but the crew approached repairs with a mindset alien to Japanese doctrine. Make it work, make it fast, make it fight. Chief Carpenter's mate Boyd Mackenzie ignored perfect procedure manuals. Instead of waiting to replace bent structural members, a dry dock task, he welded steel plates over them, ugly but strong. Machinery spaces told the same story. The blast had destroyed number 2 elevator machinery and damaged 3 boiler rooms. Engineers rebuilt systems from whatever they had. Parts cannibalized in the ship's shop, new pieces shaped from sheet metal, equipment repurposed for jobs it was never meant to do. Yorktown held 20 knots despite injuries that should have limited her to 12. American submarines reported her progress to Pearl. Japanese intercept operators heard the coded traffic but applied their own yardsticks. Damaged vessel proceeding meant 5 to 8 knots to them. They calculated she wouldn't reach Pearl until mid-June, far too late to matter before June 4th. Pearl Harbor, where the impossible turned possible. May 27, 1942. 1 p.m. Yorktown entered the harbor trailing a long oil stain, listing to port, smoke seeping from quick patches. Rear Admiral Aubrey Fitch, who had seen the damage himself, had already signaled a sober estimate, 90 days minimum for combat readiness. But Pearl Harbor in May 1942 was no longer a peacetime station. It had become a forward repair base pushing the edge of the possible. Salvage work on the battleship struck on December 7th had created a workforce that thought in hours, not months. Admiral Chester Nimitz met Yorktown at the dock. Unlike Japanese admirals who directed operations from battleships far behind the line, Nimitz stepped into oily water in Dry Dock 1 and walked the damage while the dock still filled. Pants soaked, hands black with oil, he turned to Captain Claude Gillette, the yard superintendent, and Lieutenant Commander H.J. Finstad, the hull repair expert. We must have this ship back in 3 days. The silence felt endless. Finstad swallowed and said, "Yes, sir." The deadline wasn't arbitrary. Station HYPO's imperative. In the basement of Building 1, only 400 yards from the dock, Commander Joseph Rochefort's team had broken JN-25, the Japanese operations code. They knew AF meant Midway. They knew the attack date, June 4th. They knew the order of battle, 4 carriers of the 1st Air Fleet. More critically, they knew the Japanese expected only Enterprise and Hornet. The Japanese assumed Yorktown was out. That intelligence turned Yorktown's repair from urgent into existential. Without her, the Americans would face 4-2. With her, 3-4. Still dangerous, but possible. The 72-hour sprint, May 28th, 5:30 a.m., Dry Dock 1. Before the dock fully drained, with water still swirling around ankles, 400 workers swarmed aboard. Welders, electricians, ship fitters, machinists, pipe fitters, sheet metal workers, every shop emptied into the job. Many were already on all-night shifts. They would push for 72 hours without pause. The work ran directly against Japanese industrial philosophy. Instead of slow planning and layered approvals, it moved as controlled chaos. Supervisors decided on the spot. Trades crossed lines. The only rule, make her fight. The techniques would have horrified a naval architect. Bomb damage. The 551-pound bomb had torn a path from the flight deck through 5 levels. Japanese doctrine called for cutting out damage, fabricating new sections, and rebuilding deck by deck. About 30 days. Pearl Harbor's answer: leave hurt structure in place, weld big plates over it, shore up weak spots with timber scavenged from construction sites. Time: 18 hours. Fuel tanks. Near misses had ruptured tanks across 30 frames, contaminating fuel. Japanese procedure demanded drain, clean, inspect, and fix each tank. 2 weeks. American solution: pump off polluted fuel, seal ruptures with fast-setting cement meant for runways, weld plates over, and isolate tanks too far gone. Time: 11 hours. Machinery: 3 boiler rooms damaged. Superheater capacity down 70%. Top speed limited to about 27 knots instead of 32.5. Japanese standards required full replacement. Pearl Harbor's approach: accept reduced speed, ignore superheaters, restore basic function first. Time: 14 hours. The worker's reality. Electrician Lewis Walters, 21, later said, "We didn't have time for the right way. We ran cables over decks instead of inside conduits. We welded plates over holes instead of replacing whole sections. It was temporary, ugly, but it worked." The arithmetic of effort. 20 tons of plate welded, 35 miles of cable laid, 400 tons of fouled fuel pumped out. 3 demolished compartments sealed, arc welders drawing so much power they caused rolling blackouts on Oahu. Men ate while welding, grabbed 15-minute naps against bulkheads. When hospitals flickered, civilians accepted the outages without complaint. When the yard needed lumber, contractors delivered. No forms, no signatures. Hull repairs broke every polite rule. Ruptured seams were wedged with wood, skinned with steel, and welded solid, what one engineer called a metal scab. Electrical teams forgot tidy routing. Cables ran along decks, through hatches, across overheads. The departure: May 30th, 1942, 9 hours a.m. Yorktown sailed with shipyard crews still aboard, finishing jobs as she gathered speed. They disembarked as the ship cleared the harbor. Her air group was itself a lesson in adaptation. Bombing Squadron 3 from Saratoga. Torpedo Squadron 3, a patchwork of survivors. Fighting Squadron 3, built from pilots of 3 different outfits who had never flown together. As Yorktown cleared the channel, the workers who had done the impossible lined the docks. Chief Hull Technician Finstad said later, "We sent her out like a boxer patched up between rounds. She wasn't pretty, but she could still hit." Point Luck Rendezvous, June 2nd, 1942, 325 miles northeast of Midway. When Yorktown joined Enterprise and Hornet at Point Luck, the crews on the other carriers were stunned. Commander Wade McCluskey, Enterprise's air group leader, later wrote, "We knew Yorktown was hit at Coral Sea. Maybe she'd limp in as reserve. Instead, she was launching and recovering like she was ready for a fight." Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher, commanding from Yorktown, understood the bigger point. Her presence wasn't only about extra planes, it was about destroying Japanese certainty. In his final brief, Fletcher told his staff, "They designed this plan assuming 2 carriers. When our planes appear, that certainty dies." Japanese confidence. On flagship Akagi, Admiral Chuichi Nagumo finished preparations with absolute calm. 4 carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Sōryū, Hiryū, putting up 248 aircraft against 2 American carriers with about 150. Veterans of Pearl Harbor against an enemy that hadn't yet won a carrier fight. Captain Minoru Genda had war-gamed every path. Even if the Americans surprised them, pilot skill and numbers would carry the day. Only one thing could flip the table. A third American carrier, and intelligence said that was impossible. Yorktown was dead. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, the Pearl Harbor strike leader, was ill with appendicitis but observing. Years later he wrote, "Our plan rested on 2 American carriers. Not about 2, exactly 2. If wrong, everything was wrong." June 4th, the shattering 4:30 a.m. Japanese decks thundered as 108 aircraft launched against Midway. The morning matched the script. Nagumo kept another 108 armed and ready for the American fleet. 7:10 a.m., a scout plane reported a sighting. American carrier. One carrier was expected. Nagumo ordered reserve aircraft rearmed with torpedoes for ship attack. Minutes later, more confusion, report revised, appears to be 2 carriers, still within the plan. 8:20 a.m., Torpedo Squadron 8 from Hornet attacked. Lieutenant Commander John Waldron led 15 TBD Devastators in without fighter cover. All 15 were shot down. Only Ensign George Gay survived. But Waldron's sacrifice dragged the Japanese cap to sea level. 8:40 a.m., Torpedo Squadron 6 from Enterprise assaulted. 10 of 14 Devastators fell. No hits, but again, zeros were pulled low. 9:15 a.m., Torpedo Squadron 3 from Yorktown attacked. That's when the numbers finally betrayed the secret. As 12 more Devastators began their runs, lookouts counted the attackers. Too many for 2 carriers. The math was wrong. There were 3. On Hiryū's bridge, Admiral Yamaguchi ran the numbers. 3 changed everything. But before fresh orders could go out, before the defense could reset, the dive bombers arrived. 10:22 a.m., the turn. Lieutenant Commander Maxwell Leslie, leading Yorktown's bombing Squadron 3, had gotten lost, then followed a destroyer's wake back to the fleet. His 17 SBDs reached the Japanese at the same instant as Enterprise's bombers, not by design, but because Yorktown launched late thanks to her ailing boilers. From 14,000 feet, Leslie looked down on 4 Japanese carriers with decks crowded by fueled and armed planes, the Capee still dragging the waves. In 6 minutes, 3 carriers were burning. Sōryū, hit by 3 of Leslie's bombs, erupted into flames visible for 50 miles. Japan's counter striking the ghost. On Hiryū, Yamaguchi faced impossible odds. 3 American carriers against his lone survivor. He launched 18 dive bombers and 6 fighters at the nearest target, Yorktown. As they closed, Flight Leader Lieutenant Morio Kobayashi studied the ship through binoculars and felt the world tilt, the island shape, the deck layout. This was Yorktown, the ship they had killed at Coral Sea. 12:05 p.m., 3 bombs smashed into Yorktown, sparking fires and rupturing steam lines. The ship drifted to a halt. For the second time in 27 days, Japanese pilots left her burning and finished. But even ablaze, Yorktown had already changed the day. Her morning strike crippled Sōryū. By absorbing Hiryū's blow, she shielded Enterprise and Hornet for the counterstrike that would find and kill Hiryū 4 hours later. Damage control excellence. Captain Buckmaster ordered the assessment. The Pearl Harbor patches, ugly and improvised, were holding. The welded plates hadn't split. Chief Engineer John F. Delaney reported, "The hits hurt us, but those yard repairs are solid. Give me 2 hours." Within an hour, 3 boilers were relit, fires contained, counter-flooding reduced the list. By 1:40 p.m., Yorktown was making a 19 knots and refueling fighters. so recovered that when Hiryū's second strike arrived at 2:30 p.m., the attackers thought they had found a different undamaged carrier. Second strike confusion, 2:30 p.m. Lieutenant Tomonaga Joey led 5 torpedo planes, everything Hiryū had left, expecting a cripple. Instead, a carrier underway, launching fighters. His muddled contact report suggested a second target, convincing staff there might even be 4 American carriers. Tomonaga's torpedoes would ultimately doom Yorktown, but the confusion blunted coordination long enough for Enterprise's dive bombers to find and finish Hiryū at 5:00 p.m. Final act, June 6, 1:31 p.m. Submarine I-168, commanded by Lieutenant Commander Yahachi Tanabe, found Yorktown under tow. 4 torpedoes ran. 2 struck Yorktown, 1 hit the destroyer USS Hammond alongside. As Yorktown rolled on June 7th, Tanabe logged sank American carrier, probably Saratoga. Even in death, Yorktown sowed confusion. The Japanese never fully grasped that the carrier at Midway was the same one they believed they had sunk in the Coral Sea. The math of reality. Japanese estimate for similar repairs, 90-120 days. American peacetime standard, 30-45 days. Actual, 72 hours. Workers, 1,400 continuously engaged. Combat effectiveness achieved, roughly 85%. Battle impact. Japanese premise, 4 versus 2 equals certain victory. Actual, 4 versus 3 equals a fair fight. Outcome, 4 Japanese carriers sunk, 1 American lost. Strategic multiplication, Sōryū sunk by Yorktown's bombers. 2 enemy strikes absorbed that might have hit Enterprise or Hornet. About 75 Japanese aircraft destroyed attacking Yorktown. Offensive momentum ended. Witnesses speak. Years later, participants explained what Yorktown's presence meant. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, Japanese. The appearance of a third carrier shattered our planning. Every calculation assumed 2. When lookouts counted more torpedo planes than 2 carriers could launch, we knew something was terribly wrong. By the time we grasped it, 3 carriers were burning. Aviation machinist Tom Cheek, USS Enterprise. When we saw Yorktown at Point Luck, grown men cheered. We knew she'd been hurt bad, but there she was, patched like a prize fighter, ready for another round. Electrician Wayne Morrison, Pearl Harbor. When we heard she helped sink 3 carriers before taking hits, the whole yard went quiet. Then someone started clapping. Soon 10,000 workers were applauding. Those 3 days mattered. Japanese comprehension came slowly. Admiral Matome Ugaki, Yamamoto's chief of staff, wrote, "Yorktown's appearance wasn't luck. It was preparation. Somehow, the Americans knew our plan. The 3-day repair wasn't a miracle. It was a response to intelligence." In 1962, Lieutenant Commander Tanabe visited Pearl Harbor. Shown Dry Dock 1, he stood silent, then said, "Now I understand. We weren't fighting a nation. We were fighting the idea that anything is possible if you work hard enough. We believed spirit trumped matter. The Americans believed in matter properly applied." Admiral Shigeru Fukudome later wrote, "Yorktown taught us the war was lost before it began. A nation that repairs such damage in 3 days cannot be beaten by one that requires 3 months. It is mathematics." Repair philosophy. Yorktown's rush job exposed a fundamental split. Japanese way, perfection, craftsmanship, honor in detail. Damaged ships must be fully restored. Time is secondary to quality. American way, function, speed, adaptation. Damaged ships must fight. Beauty can wait. Time rules everything. The same contrast ran through aviation. Japan built exquisite hand-finished aircraft. America built thousands of good enough planes, interchangeable and fixable with whatever was at hand. The intelligence victory. HYPO's code breaking made the repair urgent. The repair made the intelligence usable. Without Yorktown, Nimitz and Fletcher might not have risked battle. With her, the odds became acceptable. Rochefort later said, "We could read their mail, but reading meant nothing if we couldn't act." Yorktown gave them the strength to act. Those yard workers were as vital as the code breakers. Lasting impact. Yorktown's case rewrote damage control doctrine, speed over perfection, function over form, innovation over procedure. The Yorktown standard took hold. Any ship that floats can be saved. The 72-hour repair also revealed American industrial character. The same spirit would build Liberty ships in 4 days, B-24s in 63 minutes, and, in 3 years, the atomic bomb. Post-war recognition. In 1985, surviving yard workers met Yorktown veterans in Hawaii. Lewis Walters, who strung cables for 72 hours, met gunner Tom Lee, whose station depended on those lines. "Your wiring saved my life," Lee said. "When the first bomb hit, primary power failed, but your backup kept my guns firing." Walters answered, "We knew boys would depend on our work. Every weld, every wire, every patch, we pictured someone's son needing it to hold." Admiral Nimitz's verdict. After the war, he wrote, "The 3 days Yorktown spent in a dry dock may have been the most important 3 days of the Pacific War, not only for the repair, remarkable as it was, but for what it signified. American democracy mobilized, workers committed, industry unleashed." The Japanese came to Midway expecting the America they imagined, slow, soft, divided. They met the America that existed, fast, tough, united. Yorktown proved it. A ship they knew was crippled appeared whole. When Japanese pilots saw her aircraft over their decks, they saw more than planes. They saw American will. They saw the future, a world where industrial strength and human resolve could beat any problem. The workers who fixed Yorktown didn't just patch steel, they revealed a national trait that would win the war. In 3 days at Pearl, they proved that in America, impossible simply means not done yet. Numbers that define victory. Final accounting shows the truth. Investment. 72 hours of labor, 1,400 workers, about $2.2 million in materials. 3 days pulled from other jobs. Return. 1 Japanese carrier certainly sunk by Yorktown's planes. 2 Japanese strikes absorbed. Hundreds of enemy aircraft lost in the battle. Thousands of personnel casualties. And Japanese offensive punch broken. Demonstration. American repair capacity exceeded Japanese estimates by orders of magnitude. Rapid repair doctrine validated. New standards for damage control set. And a spark for accelerated production lit across industry. The enduring question in Tokyo: how did the Americans know to fix Yorktown so fast? How did they know Midway would come on June 4th? The answer: that American code breakers were reading messages in near real time would remain hidden for years. But even without that secret, Yorktown's timely presence spoke for itself. The Americans knew the plan. Modern legacy. The U.S. Navy still teaches Yorktown's lesson. Speed beats perfection. Adaptation beats rigid plans. The enemy won't wait for a flawless repair. Modern damage control practice, rapid restoration first, traces straight back to those 72 hours. Every sailor learns the story. Every damage controlman knows the standard. Captain Buckmaster's summary. He said it best. The Japanese expected us to follow their rules, how long repairs should take. We're Americans. We don't follow those rules, we write our own. Our rule was simple. Yorktown fights at Midway. Those workers at Pearl didn't perform a miracle. They performed American industrial democracy. Messy, improvised, imperfect, unstoppable. They got my ship ready any way possible. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't proper, but it was ready. When we sailed on May 30th, Yorktown wasn't the same ship she was before the Coral Sea. She was something new, part original, part improvisation, pure determination. She was America itself, damaged but not defeated, patched but unbroken, ready to fight. At Midway, the Japanese met more than 3 carriers. They met American will turned into steel, and it began with 72 hours in a dry dock when impossible became inevitable. Conclusion: 3 days that changed the war. USS Yorktown lies 16,250 feet down, found by Robert Ballard in 1998. She sits upright, battle scars plain to see. You can still make out the Pearl Harbor patches, welded plates, sealed holes, ugly fixes that got her to the fight. At Pearl, a plaque at Dry Dock 1 reads, "Here, in 72 hours, American workers achieved the impossible, repairing USS Yorktown for the Battle of Midway. Their labor changed history." The Japanese had awakened a sleeping giant at Pearl Harbor. At Midway, they saw what that giant could do awake: repair the impossible, achieve the unthinkable, appear where no one expected. Lieutenant Commander Tanabe, who dealt the final blow, later understood what he had faced. We thought we were fighting ships and planes. We were fighting an idea that nothing is impossible to those who refuse to accept impossibility. The workers who made that idea real stayed mostly anonymous. No medals for welding, no ribbons for stringing cable, no headlines for sealing seams. They went back to their benches, fixed other ships, and helped win the war, one repair at a time. But those 72 hours changed everything. Proving Yorktown could be readied in 3 days proved America could do anything. Sending a patched carrier to Midway sent a message. American industrial might wasn't only factories and numbers, it was will, ingenuity, and a flat refusal to quit. Yorktown's return was more than a tactical surprise. Wives, it showed that in the arsenal of democracy, the most powerful weapon wasn't a shell or a bomb. It was a worker with a welding torch and 3 days to do the impossible. And they did. The story of Yorktown's resurrection stands as an enduring testament to what free people can do together with a common purpose. In 72 hours, those Americans didn't just repair a ship. They proved that grit and creativity can beat any obstacle, that function outweighs form, and that tomorrow's fight outranks yesterday's etiquette. The Japanese commanders who stared in shock at Yorktown at Midway witnessed more than a repaired hull. They glimpsed the future, industrial democracy beating military aristocracy, problem-solving outpacing rigid doctrine, free workers choosing to give their all, overcoming those ordered to obey. Yorktown went down on June 7, 1942. What she symbolized rose with the tide and shaped the rest of the war. Every rapid repair, every impossible deadline met, every workaround that solved a problem instead of saluting a rule, each traced back to those 3 days in May when 1,400 workers turned impossible into a starting point. The ghost ship that haunted Japanese pilots wasn't a phantom. It was something stronger, proof that American democracy, mobilized, can do anything. The workers didn't think about history. They thought about a job and a clock. In 3 days, they didn't just fix a carrier. They proved a principle that would carry America through the war and beyond. Free people working together can do the impossible. That principle, welded into steel and sent to sea, helped turn the tide at Midway. It remains America's quiet advantage, not just technology or resources, but a simple belief that any problem yields if you work hard enough, smart enough, and fast enough. The Japanese measured time in months. Americans measured in hours. They pursued perfection. Americans pursued victory. They followed procedure. Americans followed necessity. In the end, 3 days in a dry dock tilted the Pacific. 3 days proved that the arsenal of democracy's greatest weapon was neither arsenal nor democracy alone, but both together. Free workers choosing to do the impossible, and then doing it.